I never thought moving to a peaceful mountain cabin would end with a screaming HOA Karen charging up our driveway like she owned the place. No knock, no notice, just pure entitlement wrapped in a clipboard and fake authority. She came yelling about unauthorized structures and mandatory inspections, acting like our home was her playground. But what she didn't know was that my wife had been waiting for this moment, calm, collected, and holding a single sheet of paper that would flip the script in seconds. You see, we had been dealing with HOA nonsense for months, threats, fines, even drone surveillance. But this time, they crossed the line, and we were ready. When Karen demanded access to our private cabin, my wife stepped forward and handed her a legal warrant. The look on Karen's face, priceless. 1 second, she was barking orders. The next, she was dead silent. This isn't just a story about standing your ground. It's about outsmarting those who think they can bully their way through life. Stick around. It's a story you're not going to want to miss. And if you enjoyed this one, be sure to click subscribe, because tomorrow, we have another special story for you. It was one of those golden afternoons where everything feels like it's been dipped in honey. The breeze was just right. The birds were performing a full symphony, and my wife had just brewed a fresh pot of her mountain-strong coffee that could revive a corpse. Life at our new cabin was exactly what we'd hoped, for quiet, clean, and blissfully free from the chaos we left behind in the city. And then Karen happened. Now, if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you know there's always that one person, the clipboard warrior, the self-appointed ruler of shrubs, fences, and garbage bin placement. Ours. Her name was Karen, of course it wasn't. She wore her power like a crown, made of passive aggression and overpriced perfume. She didn't knock. She didn't call. Nope, she came marching up our gravel driveway like a suburban general going into battle. Black sunglasses, tight bun, and a windbreaker that probably said HOA compliance in Comic Sans. She pointed at our front porch with the same intensity someone might use if they'd spotted a live grenade. You can't just build this without authorization. There's been no inspection. I blinked, still holding my coffee, wondering if I'd accidentally wandered into a reality show. My wife stood behind me, leaning against the doorframe like she was watching a bad soap opera she'd already seen 3 times. Karen marched right up to the steps, heels clicking like she was walking into a courtroom drama. According to Section 4.7 of the HOA Covenant, that doesn't apply here, my wife cut in. Cool as an alpine lake. Karen froze mid-sentence, clearly thrown off. She wasn't used to being interrupted, especially not by someone who wasn't actively cowering. What do you mean it doesn't apply? She snapped. I watched my wife's lips curve into the tiniest smirk. Oh, she was enjoying this, but she said nothing more. Just folded her arms and let Karen spin herself into a full-on frenzy. I'm going to need to inspect the perimeter. There are reports, anonymous of course, that you've added a structure in the back without approval. That's a serious violation, and if you refuse, I can escalate this to legal channels. She tried to step past me. That was cute. I moved just enough to block her path, keeping my tone light. Karen, you're trespassing. This isn't HOA land. This is private property ours. She scoffed. Everything in this development falls under HOA jurisdiction. You agreed to that when you bought the property. My wife pulled out her phone not to call anyone, just to record. Because at this point, we'd both realized something. Karen wasn't just misinformed. She was deliberately pushing boundaries to see if we'd break. The sad part, it probably worked on a lot of folks. You can call whoever you like, my wife said. But you're not inspecting anything today. Or ever, actually. Karen's voice went up an octave. Do you understand the penalties for non-compliance? I can fine you. I can report you. I don't know if it was the sunlight bouncing off the lake behind us, or the way my wife didn't flinch, but something shifted in Karen's eyes. Maybe, just maybe, She realized she'd walked into the wrong yard this time. She stood there, huffing, like a cartoon dragon that just discovered her fire had gone out. I took a long sip of my coffee and offered her my most polite, passive-aggressive smile, the kind you give someone who just cut you off in traffic but stalled at the next light. Karen didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. She thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what was coming next. And trust me, we were ready. Let me back up for a second, because Karen showing up at our front steps like a banshee with a clipboard didn't just come out of nowhere. This little saga didn't begin with her screaming about unauthorized decks and bylaws. It started months ago. The day we moved in, my wife and I had been dreaming of this cabin for years. Nestled in a quiet mountain stretch, tucked away from traffic, neighbors, and the endless buzz of leaf blowers and HOA newsletters. It wasn't just a home, it was freedom. We'd worked our butts off to buy a piece of land that was outside the jurisdiction of any city council, HOA, or nosy neighbor committee, or so we thought. On move-in day, we barely had the U-Haul unloaded when the first welcome packet showed up, not from a neighbor, but from the local HOA Mountain View Lakeside Residential Association, or as I came to call them, the Fun Police. The packet included a glossy pamphlet, a list of community guidelines thicker than my college history textbook, and a cheerful letter welcoming us to the neighborhood. It also included a $250 new resident orientation fee. Whatever the heck that meant. That was red flag number 1. I called the number on the packet and got Karen herself. She introduced herself as the compliance coordinator, which I later realized was just HOA speak for Queen of Pettiness. I asked about the fee and pointed out that our property wasn't listed under the HOA's legal boundaries. Our deed was crystal clear on that. Karen laughed like I'd just told her I was Batman. Everything in the area falls under our oversight, she said, in that chirpy voice that hides 1,000 microaggressions. You'll understand soon enough. I didn't like the sound of that. Neither did my wife. That was the beginning of what we started calling the siege. At first, it was little things. A warning notice about the paint color of our front door. Too non-neutral. A citation for unauthorized landscaping because we planted wildflowers instead of turf. Then the fines started arriving. $50 here, $100 there for violations that either didn't exist or weren't enforceable on private non-HOA land. Every letter came signed by Karen in that same fake friendly tone. Please address this matter promptly to avoid escalation. And just when we thought it couldn't get dumber, it escalated. We came home one day to find a drone buzzing over our backyard. At first, I thought it was just some hobbyist kid messing around. But nope, turns out the HOA had been surveying properties for compliance. Yeah. Karen had the nerve to say it was for community safety. When I called her out for trespassing with a flying robot, she actually said, "If you're not hiding anything, there's nothing to worry about." That's when my wife snapped into action, while I ranted about invasion of privacy and threatened to slingshot the drone into the next zip code. She pulled out a notebook and started documenting everything. Every letter, every fee, every photo we took of Karen parked across the street in her beige SUV, pretending to check mail, while watching our house through binoculars like a low-budget spy. My wife filed complaints with the county. She started pulling property records, HOA boundary maps, even got in touch with a local real estate lawyer who knew the area like the back of his hand. And that's when we found the goldmine. Turns out, not only was our cabin technically not in the HOA's legal boundary, but the HOA had been trying to unofficially expand its zone of influence for years. They'd been intimidating property owners on the fringe with fake rules, junk fines, and threats, hoping no one would push back hard enough to make it stop. Well, we weren't no one. My wife, being the quiet genius she is, filed for a court review. Not only did the judge agree we were outside HOA jurisdiction, but he issued a formal warning. Any further attempts to enforce HOA rules on our land would would be considered harassment. And the kicker, we had it all in writing, not just the legal boundary clarification, but a certified letter and a judge's signature to back it up. It was like a reverse Uno card, forged in legal fire. We knew Karen wouldn't stop. She was the type to double down on wrong. But that's exactly what we wanted. So we waited. We kept the property clean. We followed real codes. But we also made a few upgrades, ones we knew would trigger her like a bad Yelp review. We built a deck. We put in a wood-fired hot tub. We added a backyard storage shed that probably gave Karen stress dreams. And then, like clockwork, she came storming up that gravel driveway. Only this time, we were ready. Because here's the thing about bullies. They love control, but they hate consequences. Karen had spent months puffing herself up with fake rules and scare tactics, assuming we'd roll over like most people. What she didn't realize was that she'd been walking into a legal trap we'd carefully laid, brick by brick. That day she screamed about unauthorized structures and surprise inspections. That was the day the game flipped. She just didn't know it yet, but she was about to find out. We knew Karen wasn't done. People like her don't just back off because of a warning letter. No, they get louder, bolder, and way more annoying, like a mosquito that somehow gets louder after you swat it. So, after the judge's ruling came through and confirmed that the HOA had no jurisdiction over our land, we didn't just exhale and move on. We got ready. Because we knew the final act was coming, and Karen was the kind of person who loves a dramatic entrance. My wife was the mastermind. She doesn't do drama, but she does do strategy. While I was ready to build a 10-foot wall around our cabin and call it Fort Freedom, she was quietly building a legal fortress. She met with our real estate attorney again, went over our property deeds, checked in with the county land office, and even double-checked the aerial survey maps, just in case Karen tried to pull some gray area stunt. Then came the warrant. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can we get a warrant? Well, this wasn't the kind of warrant you see in police dramas. This was a court-issued cease and order, legally binding, and signed by a judge. It basically said, in formal legal terms, Karen, sit down and shut up. You don't have power here. We kept it laminated, like a trophy. We also installed a few discreet cameras around the property. Nothing crazy. Just enough to catch any future trespassing in 4K. One in the driveway, one near the back trail, and one hidden in the birdhouse my wife cleverly labeled wildlife research project. Karen wouldn't be able to resist another visit, and this time, we were going to catch every second of it. And then, nothing. A week went by. Then 2. It was quiet. Suspiciously quiet. Like the part in a horror movie where the music stops and you know the jump scare's coming. We waited, checked the footage daily. Nothing, not even a drone. And then one afternoon, we got the signal. It wasn't an alarm or an alert, just the sound of tires crunching on gravel. I looked out the window and saw it. Karen's beige SUV, crawling up our driveway like a lion stalking prey. Only this lion had a Bluetooth earpiece and a folder full of fake citations. She didn't come alone this time either. Her sidekick, some dude in a blue polo and khakis, stepped out like he thought he was an enforcer. Probably the HOA's security consultant. Translation: her nephew who watches too much CSI, Miami. They both looked serious, determined, like they were about to stage the world's most boring coup. Karen stepped up to our porch like she owned it. Same sunglasses, same fake smile. We received several community complaints about recent unapproved constructions. We're here to conduct an inspection today. I opened the door, calm. My wife was already at my side, holding the folder with the laminated court order inside. Karen didn't know it yet, but this was her last scene. I didn't say a word. My wife stepped forward and handed Karen the document. Here, she said, voice steady. Before you embarrass yourself any further, you might want to read this. Karen took it like she was accepting an award. Then she started reading. Her face changed in slow motion. You could see the gears turning. You could also see them grinding to a halt. Her jaw twitched. Her sidekick looked over her shoulder, then started backing up like he wanted to disappear into the forest. Karen didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just stood there silent for the first time since we'd met her, and that silence was better than any apology, because she knew. She finally knew she'd lost. The thing about people like Karen is, they don't know when to quit. You could hand them a signed declaration from the president, a Supreme Court ruling, and a burning bush spelling it out in smoke, and they'd still squint at it and say, "That's not what the bylaws say." So when she came barreling up our driveway that day, clip-clopping in those ridiculous wedge heels and dragging some unfortunate soul behind her, we weren't surprised. We were ready. It was about 3:17 in the afternoon. I remember the time because I had just made popcorn and was 2 episodes deep into a binge of old Mythbusters reruns. My wife was at the kitchen table, flipping through the local newspaper, sipping tea like she was waiting for a chess opponent to make the wrong move. That's when we heard the tires crunching gravel. Slow, aggressive, determined. I walked over to the window, and there she was, Karen, HOA royalty, the beige baroness, storming out of her SUV with a red folder in one hand and her Bluetooth headset, flashing like a disco ball. And behind her, a middle-aged man in a collared polo shirt and khakis, holding a digital tablet like it was some sacred artifact. HOA muscle, apparently. He looked more like someone who got lost on his way to a mall. Tech kiosk. Karen didn't knock. Of course not. She came right up the steps and banged on the door like she was raiding a meth lab. 3 loud pounds, no pause. My wife raised an eyebrow. "Here we go," she muttered, setting down her tea and grabbing the folder we'd prepped weeks ago. The folder, laminated, highlighted, sealed with a smug kiss of legal finality. I opened the door, just a crack, enough to see the fire already building in Karen's eyes. "We received reports of unauthorized construction," she announced, skipping any greeting like always. "You've ignored previous warnings, and as of today, we are here to conduct a formal inspection of your property." She held up a paper like it meant something. Probably printed it out this morning and scribbled urgent at the top with a glitter pen. Her backup stepped forward and added, "This is a compliance matter. If you refuse, there will be consequences." I resisted the urge to laugh. My wife didn't even blink. She stepped past me, calm as a librarian, and handed Karen our own document. "Before you trespass," she said sweetly, "I suggest you read this." Karen snatched the folder like she was accepting a legal duel. She flipped it open, clearly expecting another angry letter or some last-ditch complaint. What she got instead was a certified cease and desist order, signed by a judge and backed by land records, property maps, and 2 months of legal groundwork. She started reading, line by line. Her lips moved, her eyes darted back and forth. And then something miraculous happened. Karen shut up. Her mouth stayed open, but no words came out. It was like someone had unplugged her. She turned pale like forgot to wear sunscreen, on a ski trip pale. Then she looked up, back down at the document, and finally, over at her sidekick, who suddenly became very interested in a nearby Pinnacone. What is this?" she mumbled. "It's a court-issued order, confirming you have no jurisdiction here," my wife replied, folding her arms. "Any further action on your part is considered trespassing and harassment. So, unless you'd like to add contempt of court to your resume, I suggest you turn around." Karen didn't move. Her brain was clearly trying to reboot. I could practically hear the Windows XP error sound playing behind her eyes. Her assistant gave it another 10 seconds before clearing his throat. "Ma'am, I think we should leave, now." But Karen, bless her power-tripping heart, made one last stand. She straightened her shoulders and said, "This can't be legal. I'm going to speak to our attorney." That's fine, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You can also speak to the sheriff. He signed off on this himself. That was the nail in the coffin. She looked like she'd swallowed a lemon whole. Without saying another word, Karen turned on her heel, nearly twisting her ankle on the top step, and stomped back to her SUV. Her assistant followed like a dog that just got yelled at for peeing on the carpet. We stood there for a moment, just soaking it in. The silence, the surrender, the sweet, sweet justice. I glanced at the camera, tucked in the birdhouse. Got that? I whispered. My wife smirked. Karen reversed down our driveway, like she was trying to erase her own tracks. We watched her go until her car disappeared around the bend, then walked inside like we'd just finished a victory lap. Now, here's the best part. We didn't just win the battle, we triggered a bigger storm than Karen ever saw coming. Because the moment she tried to flex power she didn't have, in violation of a court order, she made herself legally vulnerable. It wasn't just an awkward retreat. It was the start of her downfall. But that's a story for the next chapter. For now, just know this. You can only bully people for so long before someone learns the rules better than you and beats you at your own game. When Karen backed down our driveway that day, I thought that might be the end of it. A solid mic drop moment. We'd handed her a court order, watched the shock register on her face, and saw her retreat without even throwing one of her signature "you'll be hearing from us" threats. It was glorious, like watching a reality TV villain get voted off first. But what we didn't realize, what we couldn't have known, was that we'd just opened the floodgates. 2 days later, it started with a knock on our door. Not Karen, not one of her little HOA henchmen. It was Doug, our neighbor 3 lots down. Retired, sweet guy, always walking his old golden retriever and waving like his arm was spring-loaded. Doug held a manila folder in his hand and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He stepped onto the porch, lowered his voice like we were about to discuss state secrets, and said, "Hey, did Karen ever give you grief about your porch swing?" I blinked. "What?" Doug handed me the folder. Inside were copies of fines, warnings, and violation notices, all issued by the HOA, all signed by Karen, and all according to the address at homes outside the HOA's official jurisdiction. "She'll fine me $200 for having a hammock," Doug whispered, like the thing might still be bugged. Said it was a safety hazard. Then she threatened legal action over my bird feeder. My wife stepped out and took a look at the papers. She didn't say anything, just gave me that look. The one that means, "Told you so, now buckle up." Within the week, 3 more neighbors came forward, then 5, then 10. The stories were different, but the theme was always the same: Karen, using fear, confusion, and phony regulations to control people who never even signed up to be part of the HOA. She'd created her own little fiefdom, expanding her imaginary empire one mailbox at a time. And most folks, especially the older ones, just paid the fines because they didn't know they had a choice. But now, someone had stood up to her, and word was spreading. By the end of the month, we had a whole file cabinet of Karen's fake enforcement tactics. We had drone footage, signed letters, neighbor testimonies, and a copy of the court order. That basically said, yeah, this is all nonsense. My wife compiled everything into a massive report, complete with color-coded tabs, a timeline, and a list of potential violations on Karen's part. It looked like something you'd hand to a prosecutor, and that's exactly what we did. The county took one look and said, "Yup, we need to talk." Turns out, we weren't the only ones who'd raised concerns. Someone else had already filed a complaint months ago, but didn't have enough proof to move things forward. Our case, it lit a fire. Karen's behavior wasn't just annoying anymore, it was illegal. Unauthorized inspections, falsified fines, trespassing, harassment, possibly impersonating a government official, depending on how she phrased things in those letters. When Karen got wind of the investigation, she tried to play it cool. She sent out a newsletter to the community, claiming she was taking a step back to focus on personal matters, which, translated from HOA speak, basically means, I'm lawyering up and hoping no one shows up at my door with a clipboard. But the damage was done. People started questioning everything. The HOA board, what was left of it, pretended they had no idea what she'd been up to, which was a joke, because we had emails. Oh, we had so many emails. Karen wasn't subtle. She'd sent board-wide updates bragging about shutting down backyard gardens and reining in the rebels on the ridge, like she was starring in some low-budget neighborhood drama. One by one, the house of cards came tumbling down. Karen resigned. The HOA board dissolved. The county stepped in and froze the group's remaining funds until everything could be audited. Turns out, Karen had been collecting fees and fines and funneling them into a personal bank account labeled something genius like HOA Reserve Fund. It was the suburban version of a Ponzi scheme. Meanwhile, we finally had peace. The drone stopped buzzing our backyard. The threatening letters stopped clogging our mailbox. No more surprise inspections. No more veiled threats about fire pits or patio chairs. Just trees, quiet mornings, and the occasional knock from a neighbor saying, "Hey, thank you." Funny thing is, I never wanted to be the guy leading the neighborhood rebellion. I just wanted to enjoy some coffee on my porch without a woman in aviators measuring my deck with a tape measure and a frown. But once we pushed back, it was like everyone realized they could too, and together. We burned the whole rotten system down. My wife still has that laminated court order tucked into the drawer beside the silverware. She calls it her insurance policy. I call it a trophy. Every so often, I'll pass the birdhouse cam and smile. Not because I expect Karen to come. Storming back she won't. Her name is basically radioactive around here now. But because that little camera was the start of something bigger. It was proof that you don't need to yell to be heard. You just need to be right and ready. So if you've got a Karen in your life, a clipboard tyrant, a power-drunk neighbor, a rule enforcer who makes up rules as they go, just remember, they only win when you let them. Stand your ground, know your rights, and maybe keep a folder or two, just in case. Stick around. It's a story you're not going to want to miss. And if you enjoyed this one, be sure to click subscribe, because tomorrow, we have another special story for you.